My name is Daniel Carter, 35, and I'm a single father to my 3-year-old daughter, Grace. My wife, Naomi, passed away from cancer 2 years ago. Her death devastated both me and Grace, but I've done everything I can to build a safe, loving life for us. Recently, Naomi's mother, Margaret, 58, approached me with an unthinkable demand. She wanted me to hand over custody of Grace to Naomi's younger sister, Rachel, 30, and her husband, Adam, 32. Margaret claimed Grace needed a complete family, and that Rachel and Adam could offer her a better home. I was stunned. Since Naomi's death, I've rearranged my work schedule, hired a part-time nanny Grace loves, and made sure she has a happy and structured environment. I told Margaret I had no plans to give up my daughter. That's when things turned hostile. She accused me of being selfish and threatened to take me to court, claiming she had evidence that I was unfit to parent. When I asked what kind of evidence, she refused to elaborate. I was shaken, but I stood my ground. Grace is my child, and removing her from her home would only cause trauma. I started documenting every interaction with Margaret and spoke with a family lawyer to prepare for what might come. Rachel, I later learned, had been struggling with infertility for years. I sympathize, but that doesn't give them a right to take my daughter. A few days later, I received a legal notice full of baseless accusations, claiming neglect, emotional instability, and that Grace was being raised by strangers. They were referring to the nanny Grace adores. It felt like a betrayal. I had poured every ounce of energy into parenting since Naomi's passing. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case, and I began gathering letters from Grace's pediatrician, preschool staff, and even extended family members who could attest to my parenting. The support I received was overwhelming. Everyone agreed Grace was well cared for and happy. Even Naomi's distant relatives expressed outrage at what Margaret was doing. Still, I felt deeply betrayed. Margaret had been there during Naomi's illness, supporting us through our darkest times. Now she was trying to rip Grace away from me. Then came the most surreal moment. Rachel and Adam showed up at my house unannounced. Grace was asleep, so I let them in to talk. Rachel calmly repeated the custody request, claiming it would be best for Grace. When I declined again, her tone shifted. She accused me of being selfish, of denying Grace a real family. Then she made a bizarre accusation, that I was planning to remarry and replace Naomi. That was completely false. Rachel's words turned cruel. She claimed I never loved Naomi and didn't love Grace either. I was stunned. Adam tried to de-escalate the situation, but Rachel insisted they'd return with legal help. After they left, I contacted my lawyer again. She reassured me their case was weak and advised me to keep documenting everything. 2 days later, Naomi's grandmother, Evelyn, called me. She had overheard a conversation between Margaret and Rachel. Turns out, their push for custody had less to do with love and more to do with money. Naomi had inherited a large sum from her grandfather. That money is in a trust set up for Grace, to be accessed only when she turns 25. Margaret and Rachel had hoped that gaining custody would give them access to that money, partly to fund Rachel's fertility treatments. I was furious. Using my daughter as a pawn to gain financial control was beyond cruel. I acted fast, getting Evelyn to write a statement, reviewing the trust details, notifying the trustee, and considering legal protections, including restraining orders. A week later, Margaret asked to meet. I agreed, hoping we could resolve things peacefully. We met at a local cafe. Margaret and Rachel appeared calm, even apologetic, suggesting more frequent visits with Grace instead of custody. I listened, and then told them I knew about the inheritance. Their faces fell. I made it clear, this was not about Grace's well-being, it was about money. I reminded them that Naomi and I had secured that trust for Grace's future, and no one could touch it, not even me. I told them firmly, this ends now. If they continued, I'd pursue legal action for harassment and emotional distress. I had documented everything. Margaret, trying to save face, claimed I couldn't prove anything. Are you willing to risk it? I asked. Because I am. Rachel began to cry. Whether it was guilt or frustration, I wasn't sure. She weakly insisted they only wanted what was best for Grace. No, I said. You wanted what was best for yourselves. I left them with a choice, back off, or face the consequences in court. As I walked out, Margaret called after me, saying I couldn't keep them from seeing Grace. I never wanted that, I replied. But it's up to you now to prove you deserve to be in her life. It's been 6 months since that day. Margaret and Rachel backed off. They eventually apologized. For Grace's sake, I've allowed supervised visits once a month. It's far from ideal, but at least it's stable. Grace is thriving, talkative, playful, and full of life. We talk about Naomi often, keeping her memory alive. I've even started a support group for single parents who've lost partners. It helps to know I'm not alone. I still think about how close I came to losing my daughter, but I held firm, and I'm proud of that. Grace's future is safe. That's what matters most.